Lesson 107. Well, in our last lesson, we spent a lot of time thinking about the endings of infinitives. We learned that infinitives from the first conjugation end in AR, and infinitives from the second conjugation end in ER, and infinitives from the third conjugation end in IR. So we spent a lot of time learning about the endings, but in this lesson, we're going to spend some time removing those endings and getting down to what we call the verb stem. So we're going to take what we learned in the last lesson about infinitives, and we're going to use that information in a special way to help us learn how to form the different forms of a given verb. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to take an infinitive and we're going to remove the ending, and that's going to give us a verb stem, and then we're going to add the special personal endings to that stem, and that's going to give us the different present tense forms of a verb. And just for the sake of review, here on page 127, we have a chart that shows us the personal endings for the first conjugation. You can tell that these are from the first conjugation because the letter A is the vowel at the beginning of each verb form. For instance, in the second person singular, we have AS. If it were ES, that means it would be a personal ending from the second conjugation because those have the letter E. But these have the letter A, so these are first conjugation endings. So we have O, AS, A, AMOS, AIS, and AN. These are the personal endings that tell us what person and number a given verb is. These endings tell us if it's I doing the action, or you, or he, she, or it, or they, or whoever is doing the action. These endings tell us who that is.
So basically, this chart that we have here, Bill, on page 127, is like a formula that we're going to use to every single verb that is in first conjugation. So every single verb that the infinitive ends in AR, this is the formula that we're going to use.
That's right, Antonio. And so let's go through that process right now with our first verb. Let's take the verb comprar, and let's go through the process of finding the verb stem and using it to make the 6 present tense forms of the verb. Okay, so the first thing we do is we take the infinitive form of the verb. And for yo compro, that is the form comprar. Comprar means to buy. That's our infinitive. You can tell that it's from the first conjugation because it ends with the letters AR. So comprar is our infinitive. And then let's turn the page to page 128. And now we're going to remove the ending. We're going to take away the last 2 letters, the letters A and R. And once we strip away those last 2 letters, all we have now is COMPR. Okay, so after removing the final 2 letters, we have this fragment of the word, and we call that fragment the stem of the verb. So this is our verb stem, and to this stem, we're going to add the personal endings. And as you can see in this chart here, we have the 6 different forms of yo compro, and we're going to take the stem and then add the ending to create that particular form of the verb. So in the first person singular, we have our stem, which is COMPR, and then we add the letter O, which is the personal ending for the first person singular, and that gives us compro. Likewise, in the second person singular, we have our stem, and then we add the letters A and S. That's our second person singular personal ending. So we add those together, and that gives us compras, which means you buy. Then in the third person singular, we have our stem, which is COMPR, and then we add the letter A. That's our third person singular personal ending, and that gives us the form compra. Compra can mean he buys, she buys, or it buys.
Or you buy, but in the formal way.
That's right. In the context of formal speech, compra could mean you buy. Then in the first person plural, we have our stem, COMPR, and then we add the personal ending amos. That's the first person plural personal ending. And put it all together, and you get compramos, and that means we buy. Then in the second person plural, we have the stem, and then we add the personal ending ais, and that gives us comprais, which means y'all buy. Of course, this particular form is the type of form that you would see only in Spain to address multiple people. And then in the third person plural, we have our stem again, compr, and then we add our personal ending, which is an, and that gives us compran, which means they buy, or in the context of formal speech, it could mean y'all buy.
Formal speech only in Spain or just regular speech in Latin America, which means ustedes compran, which is y'all buy, but only in Latin America. Remember, every time you address multiple people in Latin America, it's always going to be treated as third person plural, even though y'all buy really is second person. We just have to keep repeating this because we have to get you guys, y'all, used to this concept.
Nice one, Antonio. Okay, so the whole point of that exercise was to learn how to use the infinitive form to create the verb stem, and then learning how to use the verb stem to make the different forms of the verb by adding the personal endings. And the same thing is going to happen for second conjugation verbs. Here on page 128, we have a chart with the personal endings from the second conjugation. So if you had a verb like yo bebo, you could do the same thing to it that we just did for yo compro. First, let's take the infinitive form. That's beber. You can tell it's from the second conjugation because the infinitive ends in er. Then we're going to remove the final two letters, that is the E and the R. So now we just have BEB. And so that little fragment of the word, that's called the stem. So we're going to take that stem and we're going to add on the personal endings for the second conjugation. Let's turn the page to page 129, and what you'll see here is a chart just like the previous one, where we have the stem, and then we add the personal endings.
So, Bill, so basically what we have is, on page 127, we have the formula for the personal endings of the first conjugation verbs. And on page 128, the second chart, the bottom chart, we have the same formula, but personal endings for the second conjugation verbs, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Have these two charts handy every time you want to convert any verb from either first conjugation and second conjugation.
Yes, these are very handy to hang on to as reference. Maybe bookmark this page or somehow mark this page, because you can turn back to this page in the future for reference. So as far as this chart here on page 129 goes, we won't go through that again. You can just see how we create the different forms of yo bebo. And then a brief word about the third conjugation. Well, as far as the third conjugation goes, we only know one verb from the third conjugation, and that is the verb yo voy. The infinitive form, of course, is ir. And that particular verb is irregular, and we're really going to learn very few third conjugation verbs in this book. So we're not really going to have a chart for that. We just wanted to focus more on the first and second conjugations here in this particular lesson. Okay, let's take a brief look at our exercises here. In exercise 1, we have the verb yo hablo, and the infinitive form is hablar. And the goal here is to generate the 6 present tense forms of this verb. The first thing we see is that the infinitive form is hablar and that it ends in AR. That means that this verb is from the first conjugation, so we will chop off the last 2 letters, the A and the R, and that leaves us with the stem, HABL, and then we will add our endings to that, the first conjugation endings, and that will give us endings like hablo, hablas, habla, things like that, which you can all find in the answer key. In number 2, we have a similar situation. The verb is from the first conjugation. Yo trabajo is the first person singular form, and the infinitive is trabajar. So we will remove the last 2 letters, the A and the R, and that leaves us with the stem, which is T-R-A-B-A-J. Now that we have the stem, we will add the first conjugation endings, and that will give us the endings that you will find in the answer key. I won't go over those right now. Number 3 is a bit different. Here we have a verb from the second conjugation. Yo como is the first person singular form, and the infinitive is comer. And since the infinitive form here, comer, ends with er, that means it's from the second conjugation. So we will remove the letters E and R from the end of the word, and then that leaves us with the stem, which is com, and then we will add the second conjugation endings, and that will give us forms like comes, come, comemos, and you will find all of those in the answer key. In number 4, we are back to a first conjugation verb. Yo camino is the first person singular form, and the infinitive is caminar. You can tell it's from the first conjugation because the infinitive ends with the letters A and R. If we remove A and R, that gives us our stem, which is C-A-M-I-N, and then we will add the standard first conjugation endings, and that will give us the 6 different forms that we need. And again, those are in the answer key.